Greetings, programs, and welcome to another episode of Classic EverQuest Adventures. My name is Flats, and this week we're going to be doing some monthly business. So just a heads up before we get into it, I wanted to mention that some of the footage you'll see throughout this video might seem a little funky in terms of resolution. Ever since YouTube allowed for 60 frame per second video, I've been messing around with different recording software. I set it on NVIDIA's Shadowplay because it really is quite fantastic. However, the program is still in beta, so it's not without bugs. Because it's easier to run Project 99 in windowed mode, I have to use desktop recording. So this has been working fine. The only downside is you might notice the little EverQuest bar in the top of the window sometimes when you're watching the video. However, because I use a dual monitor setup and my second monitor has an older resolution of 1680 by 1050, for some reason, Shadowplay will randomly swap its recording resolution between 1920 and 1680. Now this is really annoying because I don't know it's happened until I start editing, only to find out half of my footage is in a really bad resolution, and I can't exactly go back and re-record this stuff. So my only option is to upscale it, and that's why throughout this video some of the footage will look a little zoomed in and kind of shit. So again, I apologize in advance. Some of the footage for the next week or so, probably next week's video, was going to have some of the same problem. I only found out what was causing it like 2 days ago, so from this point on when I record, I'll probably just use a single monitor to avoid the problem completely. Alright, now that's all out of the way, let's get on with the show. So last week we left off at Wraith Mountains. I had been farming giants for money in order to buy some items that I needed. Here you can see I'm on my way back to Bank from one of my giant genocide trips. On the way through the ferret, I actually ran into two baby trolls who were actually new players, so I hooked them up with some pocket money to welcome them to the server because, as most of you know, starting out in Classic EverQuest can be very rough. This trip was actually quite lucrative. I was carrying around 3,000 in coins and another 1,000 in jewels. But as you can see here, we're about to run into our first problem with buying items that actually cost a reasonable amount of money. Carrying anywhere over a couple of thousand plat will cause most characters to become encumbered. In EverQuest, the more encumbered you are, the slower you walk, as well as some other side effects such as penalty to your armor class. Now, I could have gone to the bank in Freeport, except it's much more dangerous getting out of there safely as an Ixar while moving this slow. So instead I opted to go to Highkeep. The only downside to that is it's 3 zones away from East Commonlands, which is where I need to go to spend my money. So here you can see I'm slowly flopping my way past all the guards in order to make my way outside. Luckily I still have Spirit of Wolf, because without it I would probably be moving at a pace that's slower than walking speed. I ran into Shibby, who was on his shaman at the time in Kithika. I swear to God, we literally pass each other every time I run through Kithika. It's happened at least 3 times in a row. Anyway, thankfully he hooked me up with a strength buff, which helped me a little on my trip back to East Commonlands. Ran past BDA, who were killing some mobs in here. I don't know what they were doing, tearing up the place. Slowly but surely making my way past the Druid Spires, and finally on to East Commonlands, where thankfully the guy met me at the Orc camp that's right next to the zone, so I didn't have to run any further. And as you can see, I am buying an adamantite club, and then I went straight on to buy a flowing black silk sash. So I paid around 11,000 platinum, but these two items paired together are going to give me quite a significant damage boost. I then quickly went on to help some newbies at Orc 1 with Shinri. If you ever leveled here as a newbie, you know how much of a pain in the ass this guy can be, so I'm happy to give back to the community finally. I ran into a fan of the show as I was leaving East Commonlands. I helped him out with the transfer of items over in Innerfield Swamp. From here, Quintal, my hero, came and picked me up in the Fearot. He gave me an evac to Emerald Jungle. From there, we went to the Field of Bone, where he gave me a bind. And then it was quickly back into Emerald Jungle and onto City of Mist. I managed to get into a moat group and grind out the rest of 49. I consider hitting level 50 in Classic EverQuest to be a fairly big milestone, so I'm super stoked to have finally made it. Only 10 levels to go now. Unfortunately, 51 through 59 are all hell levels, and 54 and 59 in particular are double hell, so you know, that's gonna suck, but we will persevere. From here I've decided I want to start ticking off things that are on my monk's to-do list. This is all stuff that I've been avoiding due to level constraints. Because I swapped out the thick banded belt for a flowing black silk sash, I lost a whole bunch of strength. 15 to be exact. And it's kind of noticeable, especially when I'm farming giants and I have to carry around fat stacks of coin. So to remedy this, I went back to the Sarnak fort in Lake of Ill Omen. You might remember me grinding out here in one of my older videos if you've been watching from around the start. So I can tear through this place now with no dramas at all. Everything here is green to me. There are a few reasons to be here. The main one is there is a no drop +5 strength earring that can drop off any of the priest Sarnaks. I really want one, maybe even 2 if I can be bothered grinding for them. Another reason to come here is to start working on my Howling Stones key. So the Howling Stones is an endgame dungeon that requires a key to enter, and to get the key you have to do a quest. Part of that quest is to kill the Sarnak Chancellor at this fort for his spear. So I'm here killing 2 birds with 1 stone. The Legionnaires also have a chance to drop a Bracer of the Hidden, which can sell to other players for around 6k, so that's another added bonus to keep an eye out for. I spent a couple of hours here during off-peak. I didn't manage to land any earrings, but I did manage to kill the Chancellor and his advisor. After the Sarnak fort, I decided to move on to Dalnir. I wanted to try and get myself the Crescent Armor that drops from there. I usually check for named mobs as I pass through Warslisk Woods, and I actually managed to catch Gratchnis the Destroyer. Unfortunately, he didn't drop the Shrunken Goblin Skull earring, I only got the Ixar Scaled Gloves, but it's better than nothing, I suppose. The Crypt of Dalnir is the hidden burial tomb of Dalnir, the ancient haggle baron of Cavalis. Recently, however, a group of Sarnak calling themselves the Cly have taken over the tomb and expanded it for their own currently unknown purposes. Any creatures unlucky enough to have stumbled across this place have now fallen under their sway and mindlessly protect the upper floors, while the Cly continue their experiments undisturbed in the tunnels below. It can be very overwhelming at first. The dungeon is made up of 4 separate floors, and each floor is entered through a one-way passage. This means that you have to find a different exit depending on what floor you're on. On top of that, most of the dungeon is very maze-like in structure, and it's crawling with a variety of different mobs. Usually lower end dungeons you'll mostly have melee mobs, maybe a few casters spread out amongst their ranks. Dalnir doesn't like to follow those rules. This zone is pretty much every kind of mob you can think of. You have your standard melee mobs, but then you have shaman mobs who slow and poison you. You got necromancer mobs, they have pets and they will dot you and snare you. You got cleric mobs who'll socially heal other mobs in their vicinity, even if it's through a wall sometimes. You have shadow knight mobs who harm touch you and they have pets. Wizard mobs who nuke you and cast damage shields on every single mob that they come in contact with. This place is like a well-oiled machine of pain and misery. I honestly wanted to title this video Fuck Dalnir because it's the kind of dungeon that makes you feel that way, but it worked out to be not so bad in the end. Now you're probably thinking, why am I even here? Well, this place is really intended for players between levels 25 and 35, but I'm not here for experience. There's a very nice set of no-drop monk armor that I want from the Sarnaks here. This armor is really good for its level. There's not really any low weight armor that also has stats out there, so if you can get your hands on some of this stuff early, it will stay with you all the way up to endgame. This armor is also going to help me push my strength back over 100. When I was first starting out, I just stuck to the first floor. There's a nice little room that has 3 or so Sarnak spawns in it, followed by 2 that can spawn outside in the corridor. The room has 1 mob that can pat back and forth in and out of it, but it's not so bad once you get the spawns split. As I mentioned before, the armor that I want only drops from the Sarnaks. Each piece is held by a different type. So the headband was the most common, and it drops off the Acolytes and the Believers. These are both shaman mobs. The arm wraps also drop off the Acolytes, but they are much rarer. The gloves drop off the Followers. These are the easiest because they are warriors and also one of the most common mobs that you'll find. This makes the gloves fairly common drop too, because just the amount that you'll kill. The chest piece drops from the Cohorts. These guys are also warriors, but they're one of the rarest spawns out of the bunch. Luckily, the armor piece itself seems to drop pretty commonly for them. I saw 3 of them drop in the time that I was here. The pants drop from evokers, and the boots drop from invokers. These guys are both wizards, and I'd consider the pants to be the rarest piece in the set, but it all comes down to RNG in the end. So I think I spent roughly 2 nights here, and I ended up seeing a bunch of headbands drop, a bunch of gloves, 3 chest pieces, and then I only got 1 each of the other pieces, being the arm wraps, the pants, and the slippers. At the end of my first night here, I was just about to log, and I got a message from a level 31 monk, I think he was. He had somehow died down on the 3rd floor, and he was asking if I could help drag his corpse to a safe spot. Now, keep in mind that at this point, I haven't ventured past the 1st floor. So I told him I didn't really know much about my way around the lower levels, but I would help him fight down to his body and retrieve it. Because he's only level 31, we can't really just skip mobs because they're going to aggro him. We probably could have tried to flop our way through, but with the amount of casters in this place, if one lands a spell on him after he feign deaths, it's pretty much game over. Regardless, we did manage to slowly but surely fight our way all the way down to the 3rd floor. So at this point, I've run out of bandages, so it's getting really slow. We're having to rest for health after every handful of mobs. Luckily, we finally managed to find his body, and it's pretty much 2 rooms away from the exit portal. The only problem is these 2 rooms are filled to the brim with mobs. So again, we start slowly chipping our way towards the exit. Finally make it to the very last room. The exit's just on the other side. There's only 1 mob left to kill and we're home free. But, as you're about to see, neither of us were ready for what happens next. It turns out there are 1 of 2 mobs that can be up right at the very end of this place. There's either the Cly Overseer or the Cly himself, and they are equally as dangerous as each other. This guy conned a green to me, and I figured he was just another mob until all of a sudden, BAM! I'm at 20% health. Because it was so late, I didn't even react to it. I was too busy watching Woos die to even realize I was almost dead myself. I should have just stepped about 2 feet to my left and I would have been able to zone out. Instead, I ate 2 back-to-back AoE frost nukes, a massive stun, and then took a dirt nap. Right about now, I'm regretting my life choices of attempting to go to Dalnir. At this point, it's 4 in the morning, and as much as I wanted to go back down and get our bodies, I just had to call it a night. It was way too late to keep going. The next day, I come back in and I start working my way down towards my body. Luckily, I'd put my one-handed weapons in the bank because everything down here usually has a damage shield on it. I had been sticking to my 2-hander when I died. This time it was a little easier because I could skip some of the stuff, and I'd brought a bag of bandages and throwing stars with me. But I didn't want to just leave it at that. I really wanted to find a res because I was less than a pixel away from losing my level after dying. As I was fighting my way back out, I landed a pair of the Crescent Slippers. These are actually one of the main pieces that I really needed, so things were starting to look up. This time I just ducked past the Overseer. I wasn't going to fuck with that guy again. I made my way back outside so I could start looking for a cleric. I looked around for a while. I offered a few clerics like $50,000 to come and res me, but Dalnir is pretty far out of the way, so I wasn't having much luck finding anyone. And then came Knight Artorias to the rescue. I'd met Artorias the previous day as I was looking for a port out of the Common Lands. He'd sent me a message saying that he watched the show, and we ended up chatting for a while about the reference in his name. If anyone's familiar with the Souls series, you probably know what I'm on about. Luckily, I'd logged back in that night after failing to find a res earlier, and I caught him online. I asked if he could give me a hand, and he very kindly came all the way out to Dalnir and hit me up with a res. Not only that, but he stuck around with me as I fought my way out. I told him that I could just dash past the mobs if he had a place to be, I didn't want to waste his time, but he insisted I fight out in case one of the last 2 pieces of armor that I need dropped. And lo and behold, a few mobs later, the legs and then the arms literally dropped back to back. It was pretty amazing. That's pretty much going to tie it up for now, guys. I'm going to split this episode into 2 parts. I've almost finished the Monk Headband and Sash quests, and they're going to take a whole episode on their own to cover. Hopefully I'll have that done by the end of this week. Other than that, the last 2 weeks have been pretty busy. I'm actually level 51 now. Some of you may have noticed in the Dalnir footage that you just saw. I had a few groups in Karnor's Castle, as well as a really awesome group in the Hole. And I even went and got the key for the Hole, and all that stuff is going to be an episode on its own too. But for now, I'm working towards the Robe of the Lost Circle, and in order to get that done, I have to wrap up a few lower end monk quests. So I want you to stay tuned for that, because I think it should make for a pretty cool adventure. Alright, I got a whole bunch of shoutouts to make this week, and I'm really sorry if I butcher your names, guys. So, shoutouts to Asina, Makey, Bagel Juice, Troxel, Chicken, Blizzards again, Not a Druid, Aaron, Gusturls, Zentil, and Sedana. I really need to start asking you guys how the hell you're supposed to pronounce half of these names, I swear. Also, a huge shout out to Shibby. He hooked me up with a T-Staff, which is just mind-boggling. Thank you so much. You have now been promoted to Batman, and I will assume the role of Robin, or maybe Catwoman. And also a big shout out to Artorius for coming all the way to Dalnir to res me and being such a good luck charm for the rest of those armor pieces that I needed. Also wanted to quickly shout out to Battis. I know you offered to come and res me after your raid was done, and I really appreciate that, so thank you. Alright, well that's all done. That was a long episode, guys. Thanks for sticking with me. Hope you enjoyed it, and please look forward to Monthly Business Part 2, hopefully at the end of this week. I'm out. I'm done. This took ages. Time to go get me a White Russian and relax. See ya.
You have a heart of gold. Don't let them take it from you.